Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the hearing on the Subcommittee of Oversight and Investigation on the Federal Green Jobs Agenda. My colleagues, today we will examine the federal investment in green energy and the employment and economic returns that were generated by this investment. When the federal government invests taxpayers' dollars in the energy sector, we must make sure we oversee the returns on these investments. In 2008, then presidential candidate Barack Obama promised that as president he would invest $150 billion in renewable energy programs that would create 5 million well-paying jobs, not exportable jobs, in 10 years. It is hard to know exactly how much the Obama administration has spent to promote, prop up, and subsidize its green energy agenda, and even harder yet to accurately put a number on the green jobs created as a direct result of this substantial investment. We know that President's American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009, the Stimulus Act, included approximately $90 billion in direct spending and tax credits for green energy and associated programs. Now, in December 2009, President Obama signed the Consolidated Appropriations Act, which appropriated $8 million to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS, to determine the number of green jobs in the United States. The BLS reported, quote, employment in green jobs, goods, and services, quote, was released on March 22, 2012. The overly broad and seemingly all-encompassing definition of what constitutes a green job used by the BLS, combined with the gimmick accounting method that green job counters appears to have used resulted in the conclusion that a total of 3.1 million green jobs exist in America today. The President would like us to believe that he is on his way to keeping his green jobs promise, but the truth is we're nowhere near that today. Numerous media outlets have scrutinized the BLS report and concluded that many of the jobs being counted as green jobs are not green, are not new.
Oh, God. Okay. Oh, no.
You okay? And were not in need of saving. Many of these jobs have been around for decades and were never in need of a green job subsidy in the first place. These green jobs include tenured professors, bus drivers, trash collectors, and steel mill workers. In fact, when the BLS made its proposed definition of a green job available for public comment, it received the following feedback. A trade association stated, for example, that, quote, it is our determination that the green jobs label is an artificial construct that is being imposed subjectively, used politically, and will in the end be about as successful as trying to collect fog in a cardboard box. A state government agency, for example, stated, quote, if we overstate or generalize green too much, the result data becomes meaningless, end quote. The Recovery Act led to an influx of money into the Greens program. DOD's Loan Program Office has given out nearly $35 billion, including to recipients such as Solyndra. Many are now bankrupt, and thousands of people have been laid off. In fact, last week, a Department of Labor report revealed that nearly 1,900 people lost their jobs with the shutting of Solyndra, 800 more than cited by the previous media accounts. At the same time, Molly Sherlock, in the prepared testimony that she has provided to the committee, has confirmed that much of what the committee investigation of the 1603 program had uncovered, this includes the fact that the 1603 grant, quote, as an incentive is of greater value to investors, it is also more expensive from the government's perspective, end quote. The Obama administration supports extending a costly program, yet continues to stress that job creation is not one of its goals, statutory or otherwise. Dr. Sherlock notes that a recent attempt at estimating the economic impact of the 1603 program, quote, does not attempt to estimate how many jobs were created by the Section 1603 grant program, end quote. DOE's report notes that some projects supported by the 1603 program award most likely would have progressed without the award. Just how many of these free riders are we talking about? To provide some perspective, Sherlock notes that one early analysis of the 1603 grant program estimated that roughly 25% of the wind capacity installed in 2009 was directly motivated by the grant. Of the wind projects that received the grant in 2009, roughly 39% were dependent upon the grant. Consequently, Sherlock notes the possibility of job numbers substantially lower than even those estimated by the Department of Energy and Secretary Chu. To learn more about the economic and employment effects of the Obama administration's green energy agenda, we hear testimony today from Dr. Molly Sherlock from the Congressional Research Service, Dr. Ken Green from the American Enterprise Institute, Dr. David Kreutzer from the Heritage Foundation, and Dr. David Montgomery with the NERA Economic Consulting, and Michael Breen of the Truman National Security Project. I welcome our witnesses today, and with that, I respectfully offer the ranking member an opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. From your opening statement, I'm going to assume that you're holding this hearing today because of your deep concern that we're not creating enough green jobs and that the Republican majority wants to figure out how to make the Obama green jobs agenda work better so that we can create more green jobs in our economy. And in fact, Mr. Chairman, if this hearing represented a fair assessment of how the Obama administration's green jobs agenda and an honest discussion of how to improve those programs, I would be in full support. However, I'm sorry to say, instead of that, I think we will probably only hear complaints and opposition to President Obama's programs. You would never know that many of these programs were passed with bipartisan support or that they began under President Bush or earlier administrations, again with bipartisan support. Somehow, it seems to me, having sat on this committee for many years, that the Republicans only came up with their vehement opposition to a government role in green energy when President Obama was elected. Now, every time the Obama administration tries to make a good decision on how to shift our economy to clean domestic energy, we hear nothing but attacks and complaints. But at the same time, and you could tell I was being sarcastic at the beginning because I haven't seen any bipartisan legislation, or for that matter, partisan legislation, to create green jobs programs, to improve the programs that we have, or to try to use oversight abilities to build better programs. And frankly, I think this partisanship is what our constituents are sick of and what they would like to see eliminated. The witness list for this hearing provides all the evidence we need to determine whether it is truly designed as a fact-finding exercise. There are 4 different witnesses to describe how the government's estimates of green jobs and green job creation are wrong, useless, or inaccurate, but we don't have a single government witness to respond to these criticisms. Nobody from DOE, nobody from Treasury, nobody from EPA, and even, though they've been attacked here, nobody from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. This does not seem to me, as someone who's been on this subcommittee for 16 years, an appropriate way to conduct government oversight. The programs we're talking about today, like the Section 1603 tax grant, the Department of Energy Weatherization Program, and the DOE loan programs, have improved the lives of citizens around this country, creating jobs, heating homes, and providing resources to this nation's energy innovators. The district or state of every member of this committee has benefited from the federal government's investment in clean energy. Republican and Democratic members, including Chairman Upton, have written to DOE in support of companies seeking funds for renewable energy projects. And if there's a way we can make these better, I'd be eager to know that because they're creating jobs around the country. Now, because I'm also concerned about clean job creation, last week I had a day where I toured clean tech companies in Denver. One of the places I went was Colorado, which is a manufacturer of efficient and quiet air conditioners using indirect evaporative cooling technology. As well as being a really innovative technology, Colorado has now 40 employees today, up from 11 employees 5 years ago, and revenue has grown over 500% of that during that time. I also went to Raven Brick on my clean tech tour. What they do is they produce a smart window technology, sort of like Polaroid glasses for windows, and they began with construction of an automated plant in Denver, which is going to increase employment from just a handful of employees now to 200 in 2015. And so So not only do we have tremendous opportunity in all kinds of these industries for increase in job creation, but these attacks by Congress on clean energy in general and clean tech threaten these jobs because they cut down investment and they cut down consumer confidence and investor confidence. And so maybe if looking in our districts doesn't prove the case, we should look at our competitors. The Chinese government, as we know, is making major strategic investments in renewable energy. And because of these investments, China's market share has grown dramatically from 6% of the solar market in 1995 to 54% in 2010. We should not be complicit in ceding the future green energy market to our foreign competitors. And so I'm very pleased that we're working on clean energy development. I'm pleased we're working on green jobs. I think we can do more. I think we should more. But the last thing we should do is politicize this whole discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, gentlelady. Recognize distinguished full committee chairman, gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Upton.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today we are going to scrutinize the Obama administration's green jobs agenda. After borrowing and spending billions upon billions of dollars, and after 40 consecutive months with a national unemployment rate higher than 8%, I have no doubt that the American people would welcome any jobs, whether you call them green, blue, or any other shade of the rainbow. The American Recovery and Reinvestment Act was touted by the President as the most sweeping economic recovery package in history. According to him, it aimed to make investments to put Americans to work doing the work that America needs done. Unfortunately, despite spending nearly $1 trillion, the stimulus failed to achieve its promised job creation, and new questions are being raised about programs funded by the stimulus. This committee is dedicated to ensuring that taxpayer dollars are used wisely, an objective that cannot be achieved without fully understanding whether a program is successful before investing additional taxpayer dollars. There's no better measure of a stimulus program's success than its record at job creation, a metric that the American people are focused on as they watch the stubbornly high unemployment figures emerge virtually every month. That's why we were so surprised when both the Department of Treasury and the Department of Energy confirmed to the committee that a multi-billion-dollar stimulus program, the Section 1603 grants for renewable energy, does not even include job creation among its primary objectives. The number of long-term jobs that DOE estimates may have been created by this program, both direct and indirect, are appallingly low given the sheer amount of federal dollars invested in the underlying projects. I say may have been created because DOE itself has cast tremendous doubts on the inherent accuracy of its computer model-generated estimates. Yet, in spite of these very serious questions, the President has proposed a budget that borrows more and spends more on the 1603 program, not to mention an array of other projects benefiting renewable energy developers. Our nation cannot afford to double down on costly policies with unproven results. And that's why this hearing is so important, bringing witnesses to discuss the Green Jobs agenda and determine what it has cost taxpayers and what it has delivered or failed to deliver in return. Thanks for all being here today, and I yield the balance of my time to...
Mr. Murphy is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When President Obama was elected, and I recall quite clearly in his 2011 State of the Union address, he talked about his emphasis on clean coal. Recognizing that over half of our electric energy is from coal, I'm still waiting for that promise of green energy to come true. With regard to presidential earmarks for companies like Solyndra, we have spent more, subsidized more, and it has cost us more jobs. In this nation where we have an abundance of coal and also of natural gas, instead of following through on the promise of clean coal and natural gas, this administration has not only abandoned that promise but blocked it. New regulations are not cleaning up coal plants but shutting them down. 20% of the energy generated by coal plants will be lost, which will result in an increase of home and factory electric bills by 30 to 40%. And estimates are we will lose between 160 to 200,000 jobs per year. And in the area of natural gas, there's no fewer than 10 federal agencies now creating more barriers instead of helping. I still believe in the genius of the American spirit, of our science and creativity, and our tenacity to create jobs and work towards clean coal technology. And I hope that's the promise of this administration we follow up on. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. We recognize the gentlelady from Tennessee for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In preparation for the hearing, we did a little bit of research. BLS has identified 333 industries that contribute to green goods and services. These industries have reportedly created a combined 3.1 million green jobs. However, after reviewing the list, it appears that this administration's well-documented policy of picking winners and losers is once again out in full force, as there is a wide discretion into what constitutes a green job. This is what we found. According to BLS, automobile manufacturing of EPA Smart Way certified vehicles, such as natural gas vehicles, supports green jobs. However, the construction of gas pipelines that transports the fuel to the EPA certified vehicles does not constitute a green job. Shellfish farming creates and sustains green jobs. Shellfish fishing does not. Semiconductor and related device manufacturing supports green jobs. Semiconductor machinery manufacturing does not. Manufacturing Energy Star certified light bulbs, such as CFLs that contain mercury, supports green jobs. However, manufacturing batteries only supports green jobs if the batteries are mercury-free. We have some discrepancies, and we look forward to looking into it. Yield back.
Gentlelady, time has expired. The gentleman from Texas, Dr. Burgess, recognized for the remaining time, which I think is a little less than 1 minute.
Sure. Well, we're just so glad the witnesses are here today. Apparently, green jobs is as hard to define as a shovel-ready project. Other subcommittees have heard testimony. Ms. Blackburn commented on this. The Bureau of Labor Statistics testified before an Oversight and Government Reform Subcommittee that someone who sweeps the floor of an energy facility may be classified as a green job. Someone who drives a hybrid bus for the city has a green job. Purveyors of used goods, since apparently all the goods are being recycled, are considered having green jobs. Even an oil lobbyist, if he or she advocates on environmental issues, is deemed and working in the green field. Clearly, we've got a lot of explaining to do about this program. The stimulus, as we all know, failed to deliver on the promise. It's up to this committee to get to the bottom of it. I'm glad we have the witnesses here to help us sort through that, and I'll yield back.
I thank the gentleman, and we recognize the distinguished ranking member, the gentleman from California, Mr. Waxman, for 5 minutes. Is that 5 minutes? Is that what you want? Yes, okay.
Mr. Chairman, today's hearing is about the administration's effort to invest in clean energy and clean energy jobs. And I commend the Obama administration for its focus on developing Americans' green economy, funding loan programs for renewable energy, encouraging use of energy efficiency technology in our electric grid, and investing in energy efficiency. These investments have made a big difference in the short term and will pay big dividends in the long term. In the short term, DOE expenditures and loan guarantees under the Recovery Act have supported 100,000 jobs. In the long term, these investments are helping move the economy toward a new clean energy industry. The environmental case for a shift to green energy is indisputable, and the economic reasons are just as strong. Last year, the American Energy Innovation Council, a business group that includes Microsoft Chairman Bill Gates, the CEOs of Xerox and General Electric, and the former CEO of Lockheed Martin, recognized the federal government's vital role in promoting clean energy. And here's what they said, quote, "If the U.S. fails to invest in new technologies and create new markets and new jobs that will drive the transformation and revitalization of the $5 trillion global energy industry, we will have lost an opportunity to lead in what is arguably the largest and most pervasive technology sector in the world," end quote. I agree with these business leaders. America must invest in building a cleaner energy future. We need to do this for environmental and public health reasons, and we need to do it for economic reasons. Unfortunately, this Congress is moving in the wrong direction. House Republicans are voting for more oil and coal at the expense of renewable energy. House Republicans overwhelmingly deny the scientific evidence of climate change, and House Republicans continue to vote to roll back environmental protections. This Congress has earned its title as the most anti-environmental Congress in history. Mr. Chairman, a report I released yesterday found that nearly 1 in 5 of the 1,100 legislative roll call votes thus far in this Congress, 247 votes, were votes to undermine environmental protection. In 2011 and in the first half of 2012, the House has voted 109 times on legislation that would enrich the oil and gas industry. This includes 45 votes to weaken environmental, public health, and safety requirements applicable to the oil industry, and 38 votes to prevent deployment of clean energy alternatives. This is the wrong path. We have to address this nation's energy and environmental issues, or future generations will lose out. We have to accept the findings of the National Academy of Sciences that, quote, climate change is occurring, is very likely caused primarily by human activities, and poses significant risks to humans and the environment, end quote, a statement that the Republicans voted to deny. We were elected to address the challenges this nation faces head-on. We can't simply stick our heads in the sand and hope these problems go away. We can't simply hope that climate change stops on its own. This nation needs a strong green jobs and green energy plan to ensure that its children have a strong future. The Obama administration has moved in this direction, and I commend them for their effort. We should be working with the President, not seeking to obstruct his agenda at every turn. I have a minute left, and I yield it to Ms. Schakowsky.
Ms. Schakowsky is recognized for the balance of the time.
Thank you. I look forward to our hearing today, which I believe provides an excellent opportunity to evaluate our energy priorities and to chart the way forward in a manner that will stimulate job growth, improve our air and water quality, promote public health, and save lives. More than 60,000 jobs have already been created as a result of the 1703, 1705, and ATVM programs. Industries that have benefited from these programs include solar, wind, and geothermal, and states from Hawaii to Maine have reaped the benefits. Those investments have spurred private investment on unprecedented levels for alternative energy projects. The argument from fossil fuel supporters that we can't afford to invest in green energy is incredibly hypocritical. We're going to spend $40 billion on subsidies to big oil in the next decade, and yet these are the highest revenue-earning companies in the world. So I look forward to hearing the testimony today, and I thank the gentleman for yielding.
And I thank the gentlelady. Before we go, I'd like to put into the record by unanimous consent, which I've consulted with the minority, a Washington Post opinion piece that appeared today, quote, "Clean Energy is Money Wasted" by Charles Lane. And also I'd like to put in the record the Brookings Institution report earlier this month, which was cited by Mr. Lane, called "Clean Energy: Revisiting the Challenges of Industrial Policy," end quote. By unanimous consent, so ordered. With that, we welcome again our committee, and as you know, the testimony you're about to give is subject to Title 18, Section 1001 of the United States Code. When holding an investigative hearing, this committee has a practice of taking testimony under oath. Do any of you have objection to testifying under oath? Appears not. The chair then advises you that under the rules of the House and the rules of the committee, you are entitled to be advised by counsel. Do you desire to be advised by counsel during your testimony today? If not, please rise and we'll swear you in. Raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony that you're about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay. We now welcome each of you to give a 5-minute summary of your written statement. And Dr. Sherlock, we'll start with you. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee, I am Molly Sherlock, a specialist in public finance in the Congressional Research Service of the Library of Congress. In this role, I research and evaluate the economics of federal tax policy, including energy tax policy. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on these issues. I have been invited here today to discuss tax provisions that support renewable electricity. Specifically, I have been asked to address two issues related to renewable energy tax incentives. First, the cost of these provisions, and second, the potential for these policies to create jobs. Before addressing these issues, I will briefly summarize the renewable energy tax incentives that are currently available, as well as those that have recently expired. Historically, the primary tax incentives for renewable electricity have been the Renewable Energy Investment Tax Credit, or ITC, and the Renewable Energy Production Tax Credit, or PTC. The ITC was first enacted in 1978. Currently, the ITC provides a 30% tax credit for investments in various renewable energy technologies, including solar. The PTC was introduced in 1992. The PTC is a per kilowatt-hour incentive paid out over 10 years for the production of electricity using certain renewable energy resources, including wind. Two new tax-related provisions for renewable energy were introduced as part of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009. Under Section 1603 of the Recovery Act, in lieu of either the ITC or the PTC, renewable energy investors were eligible to receive a one-time grant from the U.S. Treasury. As of the end of 2011, the Section 1603 grant option is not available for new projects. The Recovery Act also provided $2.3 billion in advanced energy manufacturing tax credits, all of which were competitively awarded in 2010. Regarding the cost of these programs, the Joint Committee on Taxation, or JCT, has estimated that the renewable energy ITC cost $500 million in 2011. Over the 2011 to 2015 budget window, revenue losses for the ITC are projected to be $2.5 billion. The PTC was estimated to cost $1.4 billion in 2011, with projected revenue losses from the PTC estimated to be $9.1 billion over the 5-year budget window. The PTC is scheduled to expire at the end of 2012 for wind and at the end of 2013 for other eligible technologies. In 2011, the Treasury Department paid out $4.7 billion in grants under the Section 1603 program. From 2011 to 2015, estimates suggest that a total of $17.2 billion will be paid out in Section 1603 grants. From the perspective of the U.S. Treasury, the cost of the Section 1603 grant program likely exceeds the foregone revenues associated with the underlying tax credits. The Obama administration's fiscal year 2013 budget proposes to extend the PTC for wind and the Section 1603 grant program for 1 year. The JCT has estimated that this would cost $5.7 billion. Studies that look at jobs in the renewable energy industry tend to highlight jobs supported rather than jobs created. Jobs supported include jobs on projects that may have received a grant, even if the project would have taken place absent the grant option. An estimate of the number of jobs created by the Section 1603 grant program can be provided by referring to estimates of the installed capacity that was actually motivated by the grant, as opposed to grant recipients for projects that would have moved forward without the grant. In my written testimony, I provide an illustrative example that uses estimates of the installed capacity directly motivated by Section 1603 to illustrate the differences between jobs supported as opposed to jobs created. While job creation may be one of the policy objectives of renewable energy tax incentives, such policies are often designed to achieve other policy objectives in addition to job creation. The Section 1603 grant program, for example, was designed to compensate for weakness in tax equity markets during the financial crisis. Tax incentives for renewable electricity may also address environmental concerns and support growth in the renewable energy industry. Thank you again for inviting me to appear today. I am happy to respond to your questions.
Dr. Kreutzer, just pull the thing a little closer to you and just put the mic up. That's super. Thank you.
Okay. Chairman Stearns, Ranking Member DeGette, and other members, thank you for inviting me to address the subcommittee on the issue of green jobs. My name is David Kreutzer. I am Research Fellow in Energy Economics and Climate Change at the Heritage Foundation. The views I express in this testimony are my own and should not be construed as representing any official position of the Heritage Foundation. I would like to address several aspects concerning green jobs and the economy. First, counting jobs is an unsatisfactory measure of economic policy. A more direct measure, such as national income, gives us a better picture. Second, measures of job creation or income creation should be done on a net basis. Studies of green jobs created by regulatory burdens or subsidies consistently ignore the offsetting job losses the regulations or subsidies impose on the economy. One study of the impact of regulation on the coal-fired power industry, cited by EPA Administrator Lisa Jackson, showed the more burdensome a regulation was, the greater would be the employment increase. For instance, a regulation whose compliance cost was 100 times greater created 100 times as many new jobs. A study done for the Wind Energy Association and another done by the National Renewable Energy Laboratory came to similar conclusions regarding subsidies. As my colleague John Fleming noted, these studies always start with step 2. That is, they assume the money just appears. They skip the part where taxpayers have to finance subsidies or where stockholders and ratepayers have to pay for retrofitting power plants. Of course, in reality, the money comes out of somebody else's pockets, which reduces their spending and the job-creating impacts that their spending would have had. I'd like to spend the remainder of my few minutes discussing the Bureau of Labor Statistics Green Jobs Report. The headline number that has been mentioned here already several times is that the U.S. economy has 3.1 million green jobs. What many do not know is what jobs were included to get that 3.1 million total. For instance, there are over 13,000 green jobs in the septic tank and portable toilet servicing industry. That total is 33 times the 400 green jobs in the solar utility industry and almost 3 times the number of jobs in all renewable power utilities combined. Even wind power utilities with 2,200 green jobs rank well below septic tank servicing and barely above the 1,900 green jobs in hog farming. That the 3.1 million green jobs total is used as an argument in favor of subsidizing renewable energy is grossly misleading. For instance, the solar power industry has received subsidies of some sort for most of the last 30 years. Simple division shows that the subsidies have created about 1 job per month at most in the solar utilities industry. According to the BLS figures, 35,800 or fully 80% of the jobs in the power utility industry are in the nuclear sector. The numbers make no more sense in the manufacturing sector, where the single largest contributor of green jobs is the steel mill industry, half of whose jobs are counted as green. And I want to emphasize, this is not the steel fabricating industry, but rather the part of the industry that makes the raw steel. The 30,000 plus green jobs in the pulp, paper, and paperboard industry is 50% higher than the number of green jobs in turbine and power transmission equipment manufacturing, which manufactures turbines for steam, gas, and hydro, in addition to turbines for wind power. The BLS calculations for the service sector seem almost comedic. There are over 160,000 green jobs in school and employee bus transportation. There are over 116,000 green jobs in trash collection. There are over 106,000 green jobs in used merchandise stores. Those 3 categories combined have more than double the green jobs of engineering services and architectural and related services combined. Though bus driving, trash collecting, steel and paper making are all important jobs, they have little to do with green policy and are not what most people think of when policymakers talk about a green energy future. In summary, green job counts are poor measures of the effectiveness of green subsidies and mandates. That said, the studies that have been done are consistently biased towards green subsidies and mandates because they ignore the significant job losses that these mandates and subsidies will cause in other parts of the economy. And finally, the BLS Green Jobs Study is absolutely worthless as any sort of measure of the policy effectiveness or importance of green industries to our overall economy. Thank you, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you. Dr. Montgomery.
Thank you. And I also want to thank the committee for the invitation to testify today. My name is David Montgomery. I'm a Senior Vice President of NERA Economic Consulting, and likewise, my testimony today represents my own conclusions, which may not necessarily be shared by all of my colleagues. The question I was asked to address is how is it possible to create jobs by means of burdensome regulations and programs that replace less costly energy with more costly energy? I agree with the key points that were made by Dr. Kreutzer, so I'll summarize that part of my testimony very quickly. Green job studies would be harmless, except they create the appearance of increasing the total number of persons employed in the U.S. economy. That's where they go wrong, because they do that by only telling half the story. And as Dr. Kreutzer described, they ignore what these workers would have been doing otherwise. I don't think you will find anyone to deny this. Everyone knows that this is the game in calculating green jobs. And it's not just green jobs. This half-truth is found in almost every green job study, but it's also found in most of the claims from industry about how many jobs they create. It's simply a question of what else would all of these claims ignore what else it is that the workers would have been doing. And that's the critical question for what the opportunity cost is to the economy. The second point is that some studies do find job benefits using a comprehensive model. That is, they do take into account what it is workers would have been doing otherwise. But they get to their conclusion about job benefits by assuming the conclusion, which is basically that government agencies know better than businesses and consumers what is in their own private economic interests. For that, I would cite in particular EPA's most recent regulatory impact analysis of the economic benefits of fuel economy standards. But here I'd make a further note, because it's not, in addition to being highly paternalistic, these analyses are based on excessive certainty. They're all forecasts. Job impact studies are all forecasts of what's going to happen in the future. In several of its recent regulatory impact analyses, EPA has based its favorable conclusions about the costs and benefits of regulation on one set of official forecasts of future energy prices. One thing that I think we also agree on is that government agencies have a consistent track record of being wrong on what future energy prices are going to be. But EPA never tested what the outcome for consumers would be if the official gas prices were wrong. This requires a broader scenario analysis, which could reveal that taking away the freedom of consumers to make choices based on their own diverse opinions, by taking that choice away, EPA actually imposes a uniformity that leaves the economy unhedged against the possibility, for example, that oil prices might fall. After all, natural gas prices just fell dramatically after everyone was sure they would never do that. In reflecting on my testimony last night, I realized, though, that I'd left out the most important part. That jobs are not an appropriate measure of the merits of energy and environmental policies. The BLS report is valuable in an ironic way because it pushes the obsession with counting jobs to an extreme. The valid reason for environmental regulations is not job creation. We should be concerned about the current level of unemployment, but environmental regulations and energy subsidies make no contribution to solving it. They're more likely to move employed people from one job to another, and they don't address the underlying causes of unemployment. Job creation is a little irrelevant to them. The reason for environmental regulation is to deal with externalities, cases in which the market is not sufficient to get the maximum benefit for society. And in order to get that maximum benefit for society, regulations like ambient air quality standards need to be set at levels that balance benefits for health and the environment against the other goods that must be given up to provide those benefits. Part of the cost of environmental regulations is the labor that's diverted from other productive activities. So jobs are part of the cost. They need to be paid attention to, but on that side of the ledger. I'm much more skeptical that an economic justification can ever be found for the complex of energy subsidies and mandates that now masquerade as energy and environmental and energy security policies. But if it's to be found, it won't be in treating these programs as engines of job creation or new economy, but by evaluating whether they provide energy security and environmental benefits worth more than their cost. And even more important, by comparing the current policies that pick winners among technologies based on political and bureaucratic evaluations with policies that address the alleged environmental and energy security issues directly and create a level playing field for all the solutions. So my conclusion from is job estimates tell us nothing about any of the matters that have to be considered in an attempt to design energy and environmental policy that makes the largest contribution to our national welfare. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Dr. Green, welcome.
Chairman Stern, Ranking Member DeGette, thank you and members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting me to testify today. I am Kenneth Green. I'm a resident scholar at the American Enterprise Institute, and I can, in fact, define a green job. That's one job that I hold, since all of my jobs, of course, have been green jobs, and my family has been green for many generations now. As with the others, my testimony reflects my views only. It should not be construed as reflecting the views of any organization I may affiliate with. I've appended a study with my testimony on the subject of green jobs conducted in 2011, and I would request that that be added to the official record when my testimony is submitted.
By unanimous consent, so ordered.
Thank you. Much of my commentary will derive from that study and the research that went into it. Three fallacies underpin the green jobs agenda. The first fallacy is that there is a compelling reason for the government to reorder the private sector economy to make things more green more quickly. The second fallacy is that the government can intervene in the economy to create new jobs on net. And the third fallacy is that bureaucrats make good venture capitalists. I will take them in order. In the United States and in virtually every other developed country, we've seen the same trends play out while people engaged in ordinary non-green jobs using non-green technologies to pursue their development. At first, they degrade their environment, but as they meet their basic needs, they clean up their environment. Hence, environmental improvement in the United States has been spectacular in virtually all parameters. Our air and water pollution levels are bare fractions of what they were. The burden to persistent chemicals in the environment is down. Deforestation was reversed. Wildlife is largely protected. And the U.S. leads the world in the reduction of emissions of greenhouse gases without, I might point out, either being part of an international coalition or having national legislation. To be sure, some of these improvements were driven by regulations, particularly local regulations, but what made them possible was the underlying reality, which is free market economies naturally seek to use less energy and resources per unit of production, simply out of a desire to make a profit. And democratic market economies follow a predictable cycle of environmental repair as people are free to express their values for environmental quality. Indeed, there's evidence that we are far past the point of diminishing returns on many environmental regulations, and we should be seeking ways to reform them so that they impose less burden on our economy rather than looking to pile on still more in the name of a green agenda. The second fallacy is that government intervention in markets can improve them to the point where they create more jobs. Well, to create a job at point A, the government must, as my other panelists have pointed out, must take money from the productive economy at point B. The government doesn't have any of its own money, so it has to take the money out of the economy. Since the government also imposes costs to operate, they must take a cut of the money that passes through their hands on the way from point A to point B. And since they tend to create union wage jobs rather than competitive market wage jobs, at the end of the day, the result is less jobs on net. The third fallacy is that bureaucrats can direct taxpayer capital to uses rejected by private venture capitalists, and through special knowledge, only privy to them, pick the technologies that will win in the marketplace of the future and find consumer demand. Government certainly has a legitimate role to play in funding basic R&D. The military is particularly good with this, in producing technologies that later have commercial potential. But evidence suggests government is a very poor venture capitalist when it comes to investing in R&D, even worse in trying to help self-proclaimed technologies of tomorrow cross over the valley of death, which all the technologies that we have today somehow managed to get over without much help from government. The landscape is positively littered with the debris of the President's green technology investment programs, with billions of dollars of taxpayer money thrown into businesses that were of dubious potential from the start. According to one list published in May of this year, failed efforts include Solyndra, Beacon Power, Ener1, Range Fuels, Solar Trust of America, SpectraWatt, Evergreen Solar, Eastern Energy, Unisolar, Bright Automotive, Olson's Crop Service, Energy Conversion Devices, Savello, Slag, Solon, Q-Cells, and Mountain Plaza. I could go on. There's another list in my testimony of companies teetering on the brink of bankruptcy, and these include Abound Solar, A123 Systems, Bright Source Energy, Fisker Automotive, First Solar, and more. Now, I was asked to quickly discuss how the green job agenda has played out in other countries that have tried it. I'll start in Spain. In March of 2009, researchers at the Universidad Rey Juan Carlos calculated that from 2000 to 2009, Spain spent about $800,000 to create each green job, and the cost of wind energy jobs was $1.5 million. That meant that in the general economy, for every green job created, 2.2 jobs were foregone or destroyed. In Italy, a study performed by the Bruno Leone Institute found that because the green jobs were so expensive to create there, for every job in the green sector created, 5 to 7 jobs would have been foregone in the general economy, and 60% of those green jobs created were temp jobs. In the UK, they found a value of 3.7 jobs foregone in the general economy for every green job created, and this was using the government's own model of job creation and loss based on tax revenues and monetary flows. In conclusion, the idea that we need the government to engineer a massive reorganization of the private sector economy in the name of greenness, the idea that government can create jobs on net in the economy, and the idea that bureaucrats make good venture capitalists are fallacious, and pursuing them is likely to do more harm than good. The experience of Europe, which has preceded us in embracing these fallacies, is uniformly negative, causing increased prices for power, industry flight, and increasingly high levels of energy poverty. The green agenda has been shown to be itself unsustainable and rife with corruption and cronyism. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Mr. Breen, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Stearns, Ranking Member DeGette, members of the committee, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to appear before you today to discuss the critical national security importance of clean energy development. I'm the Vice President of the Truman National Security Project, a former Army officer and Iraq and Afghanistan combat veteran. I'm also proud to be one of the leaders of Operation Free, a nonpartisan national coalition of veterans who believe that our dependence on fossil fuel poses a clear national security threat to the United States. The men and women of Operation Free have walked the burning oil fields of Iraq and patrolled the mountain roads of Afghanistan, where the fully burdened cost of fuel is $30 a gallon, and 1 in 24 fuel convoys ends in an American casualty. They have seen firsthand why it is an established consensus in the defense community that our dependence on oil threatens our national security. America sends over $1 billion per day overseas for oil. It should not be a surprise, then, that oil is the single largest contributor to our foreign debt, outpacing even our trade deficit with China. Worse, far too many of those dollars wind up in the hands of regimes that wish us harm. According to the CIA, over 50% of Iran's entire Iran's entire national budget comes from the oil sector. For every $5 rise in the price of a barrel of crude, Iran receives an additional $7.9 billion annually. That's billions of dollars to build new nuclear facilities, repair centrifuges, and support terrorist groups that threaten Americans and target our Israeli allies. But there's another consensus emerging in the defense community, and it is this: climate change poses a serious threat to our national security. I know not everyone in this room believes that climate change is real, but our national security professionals do. The Pentagon's Quadrennial Defense Review, the military's most important strategic document, states that climate change is, quote, an accelerant of instability and conflict, and that climate change and reliance on fossil fuels are, quote, prominent military vulnerabilities for the nation. The CIA has established a Center on Climate Change and National Security. The Council on Foreign Relations, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, the Center for a New American Security, the CNA Military Advisory Board, the National Research Council, and numerous other nonpartisan organizations have all found, independently of one another, that climate change poses a serious and growing threat to our national security. According to a recent study, over 97% of climate scientists say that man-made climate change is reality. Now, I'm not a climate scientist. I'm a former frontline combat leader in the U.S. military, and as a combat leader, if 97% of my intelligence indicated that I would face a lethal danger that would risk the lives of my paratroopers, I would be committing unconscionable military malpractice if I did not listen and act on that information. Fortunately, we see leaders acting in the same vein today in Kern County, California, and other places across America. Located in the high desert, Kern supplied the crude that fueled much of the mid-20th century oil boom. Kern County has always been proud to provide American energy. That's why, in the 21st century, Kern has turned to renewable sources, becoming the largest producer of wind and solar energy in California by a very large margin. Clean technologies are creating jobs in a place where unemployment had been 64% higher than the national average. 2 months ago, in this very building, I stood with Jeff Duff, the CEO of Airstreams Renewables, a technical school in Kern County that trains wind turbine technicians. Airstreams is proud that 70% of its graduates are veterans. One of Jeff's students, a naval electrician, struggled to find work after leaving the service. He left a night job at a mortuary to join Airstreams and then graduated at the top of his class. Now he's serving his community by building the energy economy of the future. As we debate clean technologies, we often ignore energy's impact on our national security. There will be a lot of emphasis in this room today on cost. But the price of fossil fuels includes more than searching, extracting, and shipping. There are security costs that we must recognize. Fossil fuels fund extremists and breed dependency on nations that don't share our values. We can let stories like Kern County's be what they are today, promising but not commonplace, or instead, we can lead by investing in 21st century technologies that keep America safe and prosperous. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I look forward to your questions.
And thank you. And I'll open with my questions. Dr. Sherlock, let me ask, we have a slide we'd like to put up if you could, and perhaps not everybody can see it, but I'll give a copy to the ranking member and anybody other.
I don't know, where's the slide from?
It's from the prepared testimony.
It's from Dr. Sherlock's prepared testimony.
Okay.
And if you look at this slide, and Dr. Sherlock, I'll have you explain it, you can see that the upper portion of the slide is computer generated by the Department of Energy on construction phase jobs that are created and what they project operational jobs to be created. And the lower portion is actually what actually occurred. Is that correct, Dr. Sherlock?
It's an illustrative example to demonstrate the difference between a job supported as opposed to a potential job created.
But it's also to show the projected based upon a computer model, isn't it also, and actually what occurred?
It's based on NREL's computer model and then based on earlier research using the estimate of 39%, where early estimates showed that 39% of the wind energy capacity installed in 2009 was directly motivated by the grant rather than resulting from other incentives or other factors.
Well, let's take one of the most egregious examples. The total direct plus indirect and induced operational phase showed from 9,700 to 10,000 jobs will be created, but the direct plus indirect actually is 1,989 to 2,145. According to the illustrated example estimated by the, I guess, your office. Is that correct?
It is the NREL's estimates multiplied by the 39% that was found in the earlier Berkeley Lab study, yes.
What do you attribute the huge difference, for example, between the 10,000 and the 2,000 that we show on the chart? What do you contribute that to?
The major difference is that a number of projects would have gone forward even if the grant were not available. So for example, if only the PTC and the ITC had been available, some of the projects that chose to elect to receive the grant would have happened in the alternative world that's not observed, where only the tax credits were available. So those projects that would have happened in the alternative world are jobs that are supported rather than jobs that are directly created.
So the long and short of it, the computer model is including a lot of jobs that would have occurred anyway.
Essentially, yes.
How much money so far has been provided under Section 1603 to fund these large wind projects?
I don't have the precise number for wind creation in front of me. It's been about 11 million out the door total, and roughly 90% of that has gone to wind.
And these are the jobs that resulted from that expenditure on your chart?
This is wind and solar jobs, yes.
Isn't it true that additional money has come from private and other sources without the government?
Yes, yes. So the government grants 30% of the roughly, and then the rest of that would be from private investors.
Anything else you'd like to add from this chart before we move on?
I think it's really important to emphasize when you're looking at job studies, when you're looking, just to make sure you're comparing apples to apples, that when you're looking at jobs supported, that's what you're looking at, and when you're looking to try to estimate jobs created, that's what you're looking at. So be careful with the language that's used.
You know, the stimulus package that provided this 1603 program, wasn't the inducement for, instead of getting tax credits, you're going to get sheer payment. Isn't that true?
Yes, that was the purpose of it.
And isn't that a stronger incentive for companies because they can get cash from the government instead of tax incentive to be in the 1603 program?
Yes, there were a number of companies that faced financing frictions, weren't able to find partnerships to turn those tax credits into equity, and that tax equity markets may have worked well for some of the larger projects, but especially for smaller companies.
So basically the government's giving money away rather than putting it as a tax incentive.
It's being paid out as a grant instead of foregone revenue in the
Mr. Kreutzer, with regard to the BLS reporting, concluding that there are 3.1 million green jobs, is there a coherent and rational definition of green jobs, or is it so broad that it's meaningless?
Well, it seems to be very, very broad. They do give features of a green job, that if you do recycling, if you are involved in helping the environment and so on. But when you look at 50% of the jobs in the steel mill industry are green, you have to question, is there any meaning at all to this? You can come up with any definition you want. As I mentioned, you could say people who wear green on St. Patrick's Day have a green job, but that doesn't tell us anything.
Or Dr. Green here, he says from generation to generation he's been working on green jobs. For example, are jobs producing energy, nuclear energy, are they considered green jobs?
Yes, the vast majority of the jobs in the nuclear power sector are green. I think it's over 80%.
If so, aren't the President's anti-yucca and otherwise anti-new nuclear policies actually impeding creation of new green jobs?
Yes.
Under his own definition. If the definition of green jobs is nuclear energy and he's out there protesting against put storage in Yucca Mountain, and he's also his anti-nuclear policies, aren't they actually impeding green jobs?
According to their definition, yep.
Are jobs associated with steel making considered green?
About half of them, a little over half.
Then isn't the wave of EPA regulations targeting steel plants likely destroying the potential for green jobs?
Yes, I guess if you consider them green jobs.
Quickly, with regard to claims that the military needs to go green, are alternative energy sources necessarily better for our military today?
I think there's a good bit of bait and switch going on in the national security fossil fuel debate. First of all, windmills don't do anything to reduce the cost or the number of convoys.
You can't run a Humvee with a windmill.
You can't run a Humvee with
or solar panels.
In addition, the biofuels have lower energy density and would require more convoys to take those fuels to the front. Third, we can provide securely petroleum from North America. We could provide 2 or 3 times as much petroleum as the whole Pentagon uses from the XL pipeline.
Okay. Well, I'll just conclude, but we're hearing austerity from the Department of Defense, and they're cutting and planning sequestration. But adding the cost of alternative fuel, isn't this a drag on the military and actually diverting funds that they could use for our national defense, that they're using it for these alternative fuels?
Yes, I'm absolutely sympathetic to providing as much security for the men and women fighting as possible, but cloaking green jobs, green energy in their heroism, I think, is a disservice.
My time has expired. The gentlelady from Colorado is recognized.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Breen, I appreciated your testimony a lot, and one of the places I went on my green energy tour last week in Denver was I went to the Veterans Green Jobs offices, which is a national, you're shaking your head, you probably know about them. It's a national nonprofit designed to help place veterans in green jobs. And their business plan shows that they're going to have placed 600 veterans in these jobs by next year. Weatherization jobs as well as in high-tech energy industry. So they're doing something practical for veterans. I was a little bit offended, I'll be honest, by the statement that was just made by Dr. Kreutzer about windmills can't power tanks. And I'm wondering, and I'm sorry, Humvees. And I'm wondering, Mr. Breen, if you can just briefly say what you mean when you say that it's very briefly, that it's in America's interest to move towards alternative energy. Did you mean something as shallow as windmills can't power Humvees?
Of course not. No one
what
would
did
suggest
you mean,
that they
Mr.
could.
Breen?
We have 2 very linked problems in the national security space. One is a dependence on petroleum as a single source of fuel for virtually every platform that we use, from naval to ground-based. And again, I think there's a lot of apples to oranges comparison going on in the analysis. Nobody's talking about moving Navy biofuels to a forward operating base. The Navy doesn't have any forward operating bases, so let's be clear on that. Second, we have the problem of climate change, an acknowledged national security threat of climate change. And taking action on that, certainly, wind, solar, other technologies that allow us to use our natural resources cleanly have a lot to do with that. But climate change is not the sole reason that, for example, the Air Force is moving many of its installations to wind and solar. They want to be able to continue military operations if they're cut off from the civilian grid for a variety of reasons, many of which are plausible, such as a Chinese cyber attack on the grid, which any cyber expert will tell you is more than possible.
Thank you. I have a couple of other questions. And I agree with what a lot of our witnesses said about the fact that the sole reason for the government to invest in any energy policy, including clean energy and renewables, is to develop renewable energy. Job creation should be a tertiary benefit. It shouldn't be the primary benefit. It should flow from this policy to move us away from foreign fuels and into domestically developed fuels. So I want to ask, first of all, I want to ask you, Dr. Sherlock, you talked about the statistics, and I think it's an interesting point about would the jobs have been there anyway. I want to ask you about if you've reviewed the tax credits related to oil and gas, if those same principles apply about job creation from oil and gas industry tax breaks.
If the market prices are going to be the motivating factor generating investment in oil and gas resources, then that may be the factor driving jobs rather than the tax incentives.
Okay, so just because you're giving tax incentives to the oil and gas industry doesn't mean that's necessarily what's creating jobs, correct?
The same holds for both industries.
Right,
yes.
okay, so that's true for any energy tax credit, right?
Yes.
Okay, now I want to ask a couple of questions about the government role in energy production in general, both from the standpoint of green energy and oil and gas. Several of the witnesses have been critical of the job estimates from the Section 1603 Renewable Energy Grant Program, so I just want to take a step back. Mr. Green, do you support any federal role in supporting green and renewable energy, yes or no? Yes. Yes, okay. Mr. Kreutzer? Dr. Kreutzer, excuse me.
No.
No. Dr. Montgomery? Yes or no?
Yes on R&D, no on production.
Thank you. And Mr. Breen?
Yes, of course.
Now, let me turn to oil and gas subsidy. Ms. Sherlock, I'm about to ask her. Ms. Sherlock, your testimony describes the subsidies and tax credits that go to traditional fossil fuels. What is the annual value of those tax credits? Do you know?
It depends which incentives are being included, whether you're including things like the Section 199 deduction as is done.
My staff says it was about $2.4 billion in 2010. Does that sound about right?
Yes.
Now, Dr. Green, do you support those tax credits and tax breaks for oil and gas, yes or no?
I'm on record repeatedly as opposing all genuine subsidies.
So your answer is no?
No.
Dr. Kreutzer?
This is have you stop beating your wife sort of question, so I can't give you a yes
Well,
or
do
no.
you support the tax credits and tax breaks for oil and gas? You said you don't support them for renewable fuels. Do you support them for oil and gas?
The one that you're talking about for oil and gas
Yes or no?
applies to renewables. I don't support genuine subsidies. I don't call the 199 a subsidy.
Okay. Dr. Montgomery, yes or no?
Again, it's not a question that can be answered yes or no. It's highly oversimplified, and I can't answer.
So you can give a clear answer for the renewables, but not for the oil and gas, correct?
I did give a clear answer that for the renewables, I support R&D and not production subsidies.
Let me ask about one more thing. The Section 263 tax deduction is a deduction for intangible drilling costs. This subsidy allows oil producers to deduct business costs like fuel repairs and drilling supplies, and then rather than taking them over the life of the investment, oil companies can claim them in the first year. Dr. Kreutzer, do you support that tax break for oil companies, yes or no?
We're in favor of having everything expensed for everybody.
Okay, so your answer would be no, because it's in 1 year.
No, we're in favor of yes, we want that, and we would like to have that.
Dr. Montgomery, Mr. Chairman, you spent a minute and 30 seconds.
Prerogative
Let me just have
of
the
the
rest.
chairman, and I'm the chair.
Oh, you're going to cut me off sooner than
Well,
you.
you've had a minute and a half over. Okay, you're finished. All right, Dr. Burgess, you're recognized.
It's a fascinating exchange, and I was willing to let it continue for a while. Well, can I just ask a question on the intangible drilling costs? I mean, there are other industries that are able to deduct the cost of inputs. Is that not correct? Dr. Kreutzer?
Yes. Okay. The question is whether it's a capital expense or a a continuing expense that you would have. And I think that distinction is not a helpful one to make, and I think it would be better if our whole tax code simply had expensing for every dollar that a company spent this year. They get to deduct from their revenues before taxes are calculated.
Well, let me just go on record as being in agreement with you, and I hope when fundamental tax reform is undertaken by this Congress in the next term that we seriously address that, because I think it's a serious shortcoming of the tax code we have now. And we wouldn't even be having this discussion if it didn't seem like the federal government both Republican and Democrat administrations were trying to pick winners and losers using the tax code. Dr. Kreutzer, you mentioned in an answer to a question about the job creation side of the ledger, you also referenced right at the end of your answer to that question that that it was offset by job losses in other parts of the economy. Could you elaborate on that?
Sure. When you take money to spend in one part of the economy, it has to come out of somebody else's pockets. If it's taxed, you take it from taxpayers today. If it's borrowed, you take it from lenders today, and then taxpayers later when you pay it off. And the money that the taxpayers are not spending because they have to provide the subsidies is money that is not going to be creating jobs at the grocers and the butchers and so on that they would have created had they kept the money themselves.
And do you have a sense as to a number? I mean, we've been talking today about numbers of jobs created, destroyed, enhanced, supported. Do you have a sense of the number?
We at Heritage have not done a comprehensive study of these green jobs, so I couldn't give you a number on that. We've looked at cap and trade bills in the past where the net impact is hundreds of thousands of jobs lost on net.
Dr. Green, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
Well, yes. If you look at the countries where they have studied the question, the estimates range between roughly 2 to 2 and 7. They cluster in such a way using different economic models suggests that it's probably.
Wait a minute. Could you expand a little bit on the numbers 2 and 7?
Sure. Well, if you look at, as I said in my testimony, if you look at Spain and you simply add up, these are not terribly complicated studies to understand. If you simply add up what was spent, how many jobs were created by the government's own accounting, and you ask how many private sector jobs that same amount of money would have supported in the rest of the economy, it's a simple and relatively straightforward division. And Spain found, in the study of Spain, it was found that for every green job that was created, it cost so much that 2.2 jobs were foregone in the rest of the economy. That is, it sucked up the money that would have paid for 2 jobs and only made 1. And in Italy, the number was even higher. In Italy, the numbers ranged from, where was it? 5 to 7 jobs, because it was particularly expensive to create the green jobs in Italy, especially wind jobs. And the United Kingdom, they found the 1 green job cost as much to make as 3.7 jobs. So it's somewhere between 2 jobs and probably 5 jobs.
So the Green Jobs program is in fact a job sink, which is pulling jobs out of the broader economy?
Yes, that's correct.
Let me ask you a question, because you referenced that the government doesn't have a place as being a venture capitalist. This committee had a hearing with Jeffrey Zients and Jonathan Silver. Jonathan Silver was Deputy Secretary of the Department of Energy, and Jeffrey Zients is now the Acting Director of Office of Management of the Budget. At the time was Deputy Director of Office of Management of the Budget. And Jeffrey Zients, I asked him a question about, was it okay that that Solyndra, at this point, Solyndra had just filed its initial bankruptcy filing, and was this a good investment of taxpayer dollars? And he was very dismissive of the notion and said, any venture capitalist can tell you that sometimes you're going to lose on one of these bets. And my counter to him was, but we, the government, should not be in the business of venture capitalism, because when someone loses an investment with a venture capitalist, that is an investment that they voluntarily put forward and money that they felt they could put at risk. This is taxpayer. We're now talking about taxpayer dollars in the case of Solyndra, money literally taken at the tip of a spear from taxpayers under threat of force from the IRS, and we invested it in something which really had no hope of ever returning on equity. Do you have any feelings about that?
Well, yes. You're exactly spot on, which is the key difference between a private venture capitalist and a government venture capitalist is that the private venture capitalist loses their own money and or money people have trusted to them, and therefore they take a consequence. When the government engages in venture capitalism, the bureaucrats at the Department of Energy, for instance, who are giving out the money, are not losing their own money. They're not losing their friends' money or investors' money. They're losing taxpayer money, and there's no market consequence for them. It's not that people are going to say, wow, you pretty much suck at investing. I'm not going to put my money with you anymore. Instead, they just go for another round. And so The problem is one of incentives and responsibility. I want to quickly just comment on something that Dr. Kurtzer said, and that my position, I think, was misinterpreted on R&D. I do believe in basic R&D as a role of a legitimate role of government. Genuine subsidies, I'm against. That is, special treatment, I'm against. Uniform tax treatment, I'm for. Thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentlelady from Illinois is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The ranking member was asking a question that only Dr. Kurtzer had answered, so let me ask Mr. Montgomery and Mr. Green. It was referring to Section 193 tax deduction for tertiary well injectants for oil wells, and whether or not you support those. So, Mr. Montgomery? Dr. Montgomery, sorry.
Thank you. I was hoping to have a chance to answer that question. I think I've been quite clear in testimony and in kind of presentations at various workshops that it's my conclusion that any subsidy which tilts the playing field in favor of one form of energy versus another is bad energy policy and an excessively costly way of achieving the goals of energy security, environmental protection.
So, no.
On the other hand, the tax code is very complex, and the simple fact that one particular provision of the tax code allows an entity to pay less tax than they would have if they're a different provision is one that requires quite detailed analysis to figure out whether it's a subsidy, and I have not done that on this provision.
You know, it's just really interesting to me how the witnesses that the majority have called are very certain when it comes to how ill-advised it is to subsidize clean energy, green energy, but not so clear when it comes to oil and gas.
I'm sorry, I think you're misstating my testimony. I said that I am opposed to subsidizing oil and gas.
I know, but you haven't figured this one out. Dr. Green.
Well, I have 3 degrees. None of them are in tax preparation. I'm not an expert on the tax code, so I can't testify in any way to the benefit of one or another part.
Aren't you talking about that? Isn't that exactly why you're here?
In my testimony, I spoke
to talk about the subsidies?
Of principle, economic principle. As you say, why can we not be certain about a single tax provision? Well, I can be fairly certain about very large things, like if I step off of a cliff, I'm going to fall downward. The individual tax codes are not an area in which
No, you listed all the problems with the investments in clean energy, and you seem very certain about all of those. Let me go on to another question. In general, then, Section 613 tax deduction for, quote, percentage depletion of oil and gas wells. Dr. Kurtzer?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I've looked at all of that, but I think we would be opposed to that.
And Dr. Montgomery?
Yes, I think that the percentage depletion actually has very little effect on oil production because it's so limited in its scope and who can claim it. But
so is that a no?
It's fallen in.
You don't support that tax deduction?
I don't think it's providing any particular benefit.
And Dr. Green?
If it is a unique subsidy that distorts the market and unlevels the playing field, I oppose it.
I see. And I'm sure you're aware that since 1918, we have been giving subsidies to the oil and gas industry. So the history of the United States of America actually making investments in gas and oil, not a new thing. We've been doing it for a lot of years, and I don't know if the American Enterprise Institute and the Heritage Foundation have opposed those. I wanted to ask Mr. Breen, in your testimony you talk about a 2007 study that found strong and surprising intersection between the 2 great security threats of the day, climate change and international terrorism waged by Islamic extremists. Dr. Kurtzer said that was somehow a disservice. I wonder how a reliance on oil and natural gas benefits these groups and does threaten our national security.
Sure, thank you. And first let me say, it's hard for me to understand, leading a coalition of over 1,000 Iraq and Afghanistan combat veterans, how we're cloaking our arguments in anything. Frankly, that was strange. On the point that you make, The study was conducted by the Center for Strategic and International Studies and the Center for New American Security, and it found in the most, it basically did 3 different sets of projections, from the most conservative climate projection to the most aggressive possible. It found all 3 had very serious national security consequences. The link that it found between terrorism, essentially, Islamic or otherwise, and climate was twofold. First, it found that the solution to both of those problems was highly linked to our national energy policy, which I think is very germane to this hearing. Second, it found that climate change was extremely likely, overwhelmingly likely in some cases, to act as an accelerant of terrorism. For example, climate change causes and accelerates certain natural phenomena like drought, flooding, famine, pandemic disease. All of these things create the conditions of desperation that are necessary for terrorist recruitment. For example, after recent flooding in Pakistan, we saw a 3-fold rise in al-Qaeda's recruiting numbers out of that region. So anytime that you've got people who are making their living off the land in a very marginal way and that living is disrupted, terrorist recruitment tends to go up.
Gentlelady from Tennessee is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. And I want to stay with Mr. Breen and the national security issue, if I can, because I think that looking at our energy security, economic security, national security is something that is vitally important. And I know that you all are doing a little bit of work trying to delve into that. So let me ask you about this, and this follows right on to the question Ms. Schakowsky had asked you. The EPA and their war on coal, is that making this nation more or less secure?
I'm sorry, I don't know what you're referring to when you talk about a war on coal.
Oh, you don't? Okay.
I'm afraid I don't know.
Okay. Well, the EPA is seemingly developing policies that are against all things coal. Now, there are many of us, like those of us from my region of the country, that feel clean coal technologies need to be used for electric power generation. So if you take coal out, does that make our nation more or less secure? And should coal be a part of an all-of-the-above energy policy for our country?
As we like to say, that there's no single technological solution, there's no silver bullet to solve the climate problem or the energy dependence problem when it comes to transportation fuels. It's really a silver buckshot solution, if you'll forgive the analogy. And so what that means is that...
I appreciate the analogy because I do understand buckshot.
Oh, I'm sure you do.
You go right ahead.
I'm sure you do.
Yeah, those of us in Tennessee get that.
Yeah, sure. I didn't mean to imply that you didn't. As a lifelong hunter, I certainly do as well.
Yeah.
My point being that we support any mix of technologies that is sufficiently reduces carbon emissions so that it's clean and that's safe. If clean coal meets that standard, great. I'm not an expert in whether or not clean coal does meet that standard.
What about natural gas?
Again, if natural gas meets that low carbon standard and is safe, sure. But I would refer you to experts who can tell you whether or not it does meet that using a life cycle analysis or some other form of analysis.
Let's ask some of the experts that are on the panel. Would anyone else like to weigh in on this? EPA and their battle against coal.
Well,
Go ahead.
It certainly doesn't make us more energy secure to ignore the energy source that we have in greatest abundance, which we do not need to import. In fact, we export it.
I think it's increasingly obvious that the word green here in this case really only means low carbon. And therefore, the agenda is one of purely decarbonization and climate change, not really of energy security, not really of air pollution. Because if it were about air pollution or just clean energy, you would have uniform support for things like diverse nuclear power, natural gas, and so forth. And so, to repeat what Dr. Kurtz said, affordability being a critical part of keeping our economy going, which is how we fund our military, which is how we stay secure, in a world that is that way, it does not make sense to increase the costs of energy production and use in the United States, and that does not make us more secure.
I guess I'd make 2 observations if I could. The first is that it's by no means clear to me that anything that the United States does to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions is going to actually deal with any of the problems that Mr. Breen is talking about because of the immense growth of emissions from other parts of the world that we don't control. The second part is that if we cared about climate change, what we would be doing is discussing a way of putting a price on carbon dioxide or putting an overall limit on greenhouse gas emissions from all sources, we would not be discussing a mixed bag of uneven and largely ineffective subsidies for different kinds of favored energy that can get votes.
I appreciate that. Dr. Kurtzler, let me come to you. Let's talk about jobs.
Okay.
Okay, because I look at what has happened with this global warming agenda that we've had in front of us, and a couple of other members and I that are on the dais were over in Copenhagen for that climate summit a couple of years ago. And you just have to wonder what's going on when it comes to jobs, and I know y'all have touched on that. So when you look at this administration's global warming agenda, and you get to the end of it, would you say it is a net job creator or a net job destroyer? And the EPA, their regulations, as you all look at this and study the issue, do you see it on net as a job creator or job destroyer?
No, it was not on net a job creator, and it's not just the Heritage Foundation that would come to that conclusion. We had a panel at Heritage that included economists from the Brookings Institution, the Congressional Budget Office, and the Environmental Protection Agency, back when we were looking at the cap-and-trade legislation. None of them found that cap-and-trade legislation stimulated the economy. The argument was over how much it cost the economy, and there was disagreement on that. But no serious economists really look at restricting carbon and energy as a job creator.
Thank you.
Gentlelady's time has expired. Mr. Scalise is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you having this hearing. Appreciate the panelists for being here. I want to start, Mr. Breen, with you. In your statement, you opened by saying it is an established consensus in the defense community that our dependence on oil threatens our national security. I've heard many people in the Defense Department, I'd agree with them, frankly, that our dependence on Middle Eastern oil specifically is a threat to our national security. I have heard of no established consensus that our dependence on oil is a threat to our national security. Do you have any data that backs this up, that creates this established consensus you refer to?
I rely on the statements of the Secretary of Defense, the Chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff, and all 3 service secretaries when I say established consensus.
I've heard many of them express their concern about foreign oil. You know, and I make it even more specific to Middle Eastern oil, but frankly, I would imagine if you ask the Secretary of Defense to count how many billions of dollars that American energy production actually yields to the Federal Treasury to pay for our national security, to fund the Department of Defense. I hope you're not suggesting that if we just shut down our oil manufacturing in the United States, that would be a good thing for our national security. Is that what you're suggesting?
No, of course not. I'm not saying that the use of oil, I want to be very clear on this point, I'm not saying that the use of oil is in any way bad for our national security. What I'm saying, sir, is that our dependence on a single source of fuel is a threat.
Nobody's talking about, I support an all of the above energy strategy, which says you don't just depend on oil, but you absolutely explore for oil, you explore for natural gas, you advance coal, you advance nuclear, you advance wind, you advance solar. You do all of the above. But I would hope you'd recognize that American energy production is really the key to energy independence in this country, and the fact that so many areas of American known reserves and even potential reserves are shut off by federal policy is a threat to our national security. And that's why I was asking. You say in this that there's an established consensus. That would imply that you've got some kind of data to back that up, and if you do, please get it to me, because when I hear people talking about concerns and threats to our national security, it's things like Middle Eastern oil dependency that is a real problem. But the fact that we produce energy, oil, natural gas, and others in this country, I haven't heard anybody in the Defense Department implying there's a consensus.
I mean, as I said,
because it actually funds our national security.
Sure.
I just hope you'd recognize that.
No, I mean, as I said, this is a silver buckshot problem. First of all, nobody's suggesting that oil is not part of the solution.
Your statement is not targeted towards foreign oil. I mean, if we open up Keystone tomorrow, which I would hope we would do. Unfortunately, President Obama chose a radical approach to saying no. But if we open up Keystone tomorrow, that's 1 million barrels a day we'd be getting from a friend that we wouldn't have to be getting from some of these countries that don't like us. I think that would advance our energy security. But your statement actually implies the opposite. I want to ask, want to ask.
Can I respond to
Dr.
that, sir?
Well, do you have any data? I'm looking for data. I mean, you're making a statement that there's an established consensus about an area that you really haven't supplied any information to back up.
I mean, there's data in my submitted written testimony. A $10 increase in the price of a barrel of oil costs the Department of Defense an estimated $1.3 billion. That is because oil is a globally traded. It's because it's a globally traded commodity, and so U.S.
But I hope you'd
demand
recognize,
for oil
when time's running out, I hope you'd recognize that if we produced more of that in America, that would be billions more. It would not only be millions more American jobs, which I think is a good thing. Some people don't. But it would also be billions more dollars that would come into the Federal Treasury that would help fund an adequate Department of Defense. That's money that funds our national security. Maybe you don't see it that way. I want to ask Dr. Kreutzer, because in your testimony, you talk about and highlight some of these green energy programs. I know you had talked with Dr. Burgess and others about this loose definition of a green job, which really is very nebulous at best. But you talk about the loan program, and specifically, and we've had hearings in this subcommittee on the Department of Energy's loan program. The director, Dr. David Francis, has testified. And you talk about some of the highlights that the administration has used, and there were four in particular that David Francis had listed. And of course, we've all heard about Solyndra, $535 million just gone. Company went bankrupt. The president said the future is Solyndra. Right. I guess that means he thinks the future is bankruptcy and lost jobs. I sure think we should go a different route. But you also go further and talk about Beacon Power, First Wind Holdings, Nevada Geothermal. Do you want to expand on what you've seen in terms of what the administration highlights as successes in the green energy program?
The markets are always seeking out cheaper, more effective forms of energy and things that they can make money on. If somebody requires a subsidy, that's a pretty good signal that they couldn't make money in the market. And we saw that played out. The loan administrator had two criteria that were required to get that 1603 loan. And that first one is not the 1603, but the 1705. You had to be able to prove you couldn't get private financing, and you had to have a market viable project. Those are mutually exclusive. And we saw that plays out. He gave, this was 2 years ago, the four examples he gave before anybody had trouble were Solyndra, Beacon Power, both of whom have gone bankrupt since then. Nevada Geothermal is having trouble. Their stock price is at 4 cents per share. And I apologize, I don't have the fourth one in front of me.
I've got it right here. It's First Wind Holdings.
First Wind Holdings. After they got the loan, they had to. They tried to have an initial public offering, but they had to withdraw it because of the problems.
Appreciate that. Thanks. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, his time has expired. Gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry I wasn't here. We have an energy subcommittee going on downstairs that also has interest in green jobs. So I appreciate the opportunity to ask questions. My district in Houston is the largest petrochemical complex in the country, in the center of the nation's energy sector. Many of the energy companies, both large and small, have invested heavily in green technology and renewable energy. Houston is now the home of nearly 40,000 green jobs, even though we have a huge number of refinery jobs. I have 5 refineries in our district and at least 20 chemical plants. So we're not complaining about whatever color job they have, whether they're green or not. Dr. Sherlock, can you speak to the possible consequences of the federal government's inconsistent and on and off again support for green and renewable energy over the past 2 decades?
Especially in industries that have faced expiring incentives where incentives have lapsed and then been retroactively reinstated. It's hard to plan, it's hard to invest, it's hard to secure financing when you just don't have certainty about what incentives are going to be available going forward.
Let me give you the benefit of having served on this committee for a good while. A lot of the things that were part of the Recovery Act were just building on the 05 energy bill or energy law that was passed by a Republican Congress and a Republican president. And that's what I'm concerned about, to stop and start. We actually started some of that. In fact, I heard coming into testimony, Solyndra. That was authorized, those loans were authorized under the 05 energy law. And so, granted, there was a bad investment. We should have done better, but there are other things that we could be doing. Do you believe that looming expiration of the tax credits being discussed at this hearing has or will create uncertainty in the private sector and keep these very companies, some of them in my district, from further investing in new technology and creating these jobs?
Yes, with uncertainty about tax incentives, there's reluctance to invest.
And following my colleague from Louisiana, coming from our area where obviously we believe in domestic production, I want to ask some questions about national security implications of energy. We cannot continue to depend on hostile nations for a sizable amount of our energy needs, whether it be Iran, Venezuela, or use these profits to build weapons and arsenals against us and our allies. Mr. Breen, how much money does United America send overseas to pay for overseas energy sources every day? Do you have that information?
It's roughly $1 billion a day. Of course, it fluctuates as the market changes.
Now, recently we've seen a reversal of importing domestic oil for lots of reasons. Obviously, we're doing better on conservation, which I think is part of whatever solution we should have. But we're also producing more domestic energy, and particularly liquids that we can use in transportation fuel. Do you believe that increasing our domestic energy production would reduce these costs?
I think increasing our domestic energy production is all to the good, and would. But let's remember that this is a globally traded commodity we're talking about, that U.S. demand has been static for quite some time, although very high, but that global demand continues to rise. And so I think it's unrealistic looking down the road to think that we're going to see lowering oil prices anytime soon.
Yeah. Well, we have seen lowering oil prices in the last few weeks, and for a number of reasons. Like you said, it's a world price, and I tell people, if I drilled a well in my backyard, believe me, I'd want to have the world price on oil. So in Texas, I guess a lot of my fellow Texans say that. They just don't let me drill in my neighborhood. Can you summarize for us ways in which developing and using more domestic and renewable energy sources could improve our national security?
Sure, there are several, and this varies from the tactical all the way to the strategic. Strategically, again, it comes down to cost. I mean, as the point has been made here a couple of times, our economic prosperity and the amount of money we spend on defense is the underpinning of our national security, right? These things cost money. As you see increasing volatility in the oil market, as you see prices in the long term, I think, rise and continue to rise predictably, having alternative sources for the Department of Defense, which is the #1 fuel user in the federal government, is all to the good, and developing advanced technologies is all to the good. Some of these technologies have tactical applications. At the tactical level, there was some mention made earlier of forward operating bases in biofuels, which is a bit of an apples to oranges comparison, but at the tactical level, we've seen the highly successful use under battlefield conditions of wind and solar projects that are designed to keep tactical forward operating bases free from the need to resupply generators for fuel. So these have direct battlefield implications, down to the point of a backpack solar panel that India Company 3rd of the 5th Marine Corps is currently using in Afghanistan to great effect.
Okay. Our dependence on energy from hostile nations has dangerous implications for our nation's security. It makes economic, environmental, and national security sense to transition away from these nations and develop newer, smarter, and domestic sources of energy, like you said, that helps our military. And I know I only have 3 seconds left. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
The gentleman yields back to recognize the other gentleman from Texas, Mr. Barton, Chairman Emeritus of the committee.
Thank you. Is Mr. Gardner gone? Would you like to go ahead of me? Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wasn't here at the beginning. I was downstairs on the greenhouse gas hearing in the Energy Subcommittee, so I have scanned the testimony, but I've missed the oral questioning so far. So I may, if I ask something that's redundant, I want to apologize. My first question would be a general question. Do we have an agreed upon definition of what a green job is? I see a lot of shakes of head.
Not that any of us have heard a coherent definition of green jobs. Of course, it's very difficult to define a green product or a green thing. To do a life cycle analysis, even on a foam cup, would be tricky. To do it on a person's job would be impossible.
Well, let me give you some examples, and you tell me if this is a green job. If a farmer grows corn for food one year, and the next year on that same land in the same acreage, he grows the same crop, corn, but he grows it for ethanol, is that a green job?
I have no idea.
Okay. I would say it's probably anti-green, and given the effect ethanol has.
What if the farmer the next year switches from corn to cotton for fiber, or a cotton farmer switches to corn? Is that a green job?
Yeah, I think you're getting straight to the point that it's very difficult to define, and it's not clear that it's a useful exercise in the first place.
Okay. If a truck driver is driving a truck that runs on diesel, and that truck switches from diesel to natural gas, is that a green job?
I think green job proponents would say yes, but only because it has a lower carbon footprint.
Okay. What about a logger who cuts down trees in the forest, and that's all, he's always done that. Is that a green job?
Surprisingly, a large fraction of logging jobs, according to the BLS, are considered green. I don't know that I would consider it green.
Okay. So we don't really have a definition of what a green job is. I mean, a commodity trader who's trading in green energy credits for global warming credits in the European market, would that be a green job? Credits that don't exist, that actually, you know, trees not planted in India, or power plants not, you know, coal plants not built in India, so they take credit on the market.
Yeah, I'm certainly not going to defend that as a green job, and I don't think the BLS looked at any jobs in the financial sector as being green.
Okay. Well, I just, when I was briefed on this hearing, it struck me there is such a thing as a green job. I mean, you know, if you switch from a source that uses a lot of energy to a source that uses less energy, you know, I certainly think somebody going to work in a solar factory that didn't exist, if the solar factory stays in business and actually produces solar panels that are sold and used, I'd say that would be a green job. I think somebody working in the wind energy sector that didn't exist, that actually generates electricity that's actually used, I think that's a green job. So I do think there is such a thing, and I do think that you can create green jobs. But I also think that there's a lot of mythology and double counting about what green jobs are. Is there a better way for the federal government to create green jobs in some of the programs that we've talked about today? And if so, what would that way be? I'll ask Mr. Montgomery that, Dr. Montgomery that question.
Thank you. Yes, I think there clearly is, and it's to focus on what we're trying to accomplish with our energy and environmental policies. If what we care about is greenhouse gas emissions, the way to deal with that is by addressing greenhouse gas emissions, and the way to determine what we're doing is by doing an inventory of our greenhouse gas emissions. We don't learn anything about greenhouse gas policy by trying to calculate the number of jobs that are being created by it. Likewise, if our objective is to deal with mercury, our policy to, if we want to create green jobs, reducing the amount of mercury that's being released into the atmosphere, then our policy needs to address mercury. It needs to address it broadly and even-handedly, not by picking out the smallest source and regulating it into non-existence. And it doesn't matter how many people are involved in doing that. Actually, it does matter, because the more people it takes to do it, the more it costs us, and the less they can do that's actually producing goods and services that people want to consume. So I think if we want to create the number of green jobs that's consistent with maximizing the economic welfare of the country, we would stop counting them completely, and we would focus our policy attention on solving the problems of energy security and environment in themselves.
I agree. My time's expired, Mr. Chairman. Let me just end up with this editorial note. I do think, however you define a green job, at some point in time it has to be a job that is sustainable in the marketplace with either no government assistance or minimal government assistance. If you can't meet that definition over time, then it's not a job at all and shouldn't be counted. With that, I yield back.
I thank the Chairman Emeritus for his observation and editorial comment. To recognize the gentleman from Colorado, 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. And Dr. Sherlock, I wanted to go back to this estimate of jobs supported and created by the Section 1603 grant program that I believe you provided. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, and then at the bottom it says notes, and it says, potential jobs created by the Section 1603 grant are calculated as 39% of the estimated jobs supported as reported in the NREL study. Induced jobs are not included in the potential job creation section, as such estimates are less reliable than those presented for direct and indirect jobs. These figures are provided for illustrative purposes and may vary according to factors described in the text. So you've got induced jobs, direct and indirect jobs, 39% of estimated jobs. What does this mean?
It means that the numbers in the bottom half of the table are 39% of the numbers presented in the top half of the table. I did not provide the induced jobs in the bottom half of the table just because it would be extrapolating an uncertainty that I believed was already very uncertain.
Very uncertain in terms of the number of jobs created.
Induced jobs. When you're looking at jobs, direct jobs, and then to extend the model to indirect jobs, and then to extend the model again to induced jobs, you're just adding additional variables, additional assumptions, additional degrees of uncertainty at each stage in the modeling process.
So what is an induced job?
So an induced job would be because the workers who are employed in construction of the solar facility or the wind farm go out and spend on groceries. And so because they're spending more on groceries, the grocery store needs to hire more employees. So that would be...
And so a direct job would be?
The actual construction work itself.
And an indirect job would be?
The manufacture of the steel that goes into the facility.
Okay, and then this 1603 program, I believe you stated in your testimony that it cost $17 billion?
That's over the 5-year budget window, yes.
So $17 billion 5-year budget, and so these 39% of the direct, indirect, and induced jobs cost how much a year?
Well, this is only looking at jobs in the first couple of years of the program, so this would be about $10 billion, roughly.
So $10 billion for the first 2 years of the program?
Roughly.
To create 40,000 jobs?
Depending on which number you're looking at, if you're looking at the induced, the direct, or indirect.
Which number should I look at?
It depends what you want to be counting. Do you want to count the direct?
How many jobs did the 1603 grant create?
What type of jobs?
Jobs. I just want to know how many jobs were created.
If you're looking at the direct jobs, this one estimate has direct jobs created at 3,666 in the construction phase and direct jobs created at 355. Direct jobs would just be the construction jobs and then the ongoing operations and maintenance jobs. But if you wanted to look at supporting jobs in other industries, then you'd want to look at the other figures.
So for direct jobs, just if we look at the first year, this is average jobs per year. It's 355 jobs per year. In 2 years, 355 jobs created a year, $10 billion?
That would be jobs per year going forward. So these would be jobs that would be retained, average jobs per year going forward, yes.
For $10 billion?
Yes.
Shifting gears and talking a little bit about some of the talk we've had on taxes. And Dr. Sherlock, I'll leave you out of this, but Dr. Kreutzer, and I'll go down the line if I could get this answer. Do you believe increasing taxes will result in lower costs of energy?
No.
Dr. Montgomery?
That one I can answer no.
Dr. Green?
No.
Mr. Breen?
You'd have to ask an economist. I'm sorry, that's not why I'm here.
Okay. And then would ask another question about the President made a statement in 2008. As a matter of public policy, does it make, he made a statement in 2008 where he said under his plan, and he was specifically referring to cap and trade, electricity rates would necessarily skyrocket. Do we have, if we need for our economy to succeed, for jobs to grow, we need lower cost energy, is that correct?
Yeah, it grows better with lower cost energy.
Dr. Montgomery?
The real growth in our economy is certainly dependent on the cost of producing energy. Less it costs to produce energy, the more we have left over for doing other things. But does it affect jobs? No. I think the best estimate is jobs are going to be at full employment in this economy most of the time when we're growing, except for temporary hiccups. None of these programs are going to affect that at all.
Dr. Green?
Lower cost energy leads to lower cost goods and services, greater consumption, and therefore greater economic prosperity. I don't think there's anybody really who argues against that option, that notion. And when the country's growing, of course, we have lower unemployment rates, therefore there are more jobs.
Mr. Breen?
Again, I'm sure that the Bureau of Labor Statistics or somebody else you might have called would have been happy to answer the question, but I can't.
So do policies that result in higher energy costs hurt the economy?
Yes, if we can, right. If we have policies that make energy costs go up, that does not, it makes it more expensive, and we're going to get fewer goods.
Dr. Montgomery?
Not necessarily. It depends on how they do it, and I know your time is short.
Dr. Green?
Well, we see this when oil prices spike up, the economy tends to contract. So clearly the relationship is there. Higher priced energy, lower economic output.
Mr. Breen, I'll give you another shot.
Same answer.
Okay, thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. I think if it's okay with everyone, we've dwindled down on the dais here, but I'd like to recognize Ranking Member DeGette for a follow-up question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So I just wanted to follow up on a couple of things. The first one is I really thought that Mr. Barton, actually, too bad he's not here, I thought he made two good points. The first good point is that if you're going to create green jobs, they should be sustainable over time. Just like any other government support you're going to give to any program, whether it's in traditional fuels or anything else, it should be viewed as a startup, not as over time, say since 1918. But the second thing I think we need to figure out, and I think that Mr. Barton really made a good point about this, is that if we're going to be looking at these renewable energy programs and alternative energy as job creators, we really should kind of nail down the types of jobs. And Dr. Sherlock, that's the point you're making, is we need to really nail down what types of jobs. And to that end, Mr. Chairman, maybe you can talk to Chairman Stearns about the concept of actually bringing in some of these agencies that are defining these jobs in these ways, like the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the other agencies, so they can explain to us, rather than just criticizing this in a vacuum, we can find out why they are defining some of these jobs as green jobs and others as not green jobs. That's my only suggestion. Mr. Breen, I just wanted to ask you, you were trying to answer Mr. Scalise's question about domestic oil versus foreign oil, and did that make a difference in terms of our oil independence? And he didn't really let you get your whole answer out, so I thought I'd give you this opportunity to complete your answer.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much. My answer is that the problem is one of single source dependence. If you rely on a single globally traded commodity, and again, the foreign domestic distinction is somewhat vacuous, right? This is a globally traded commodity that, again, is dependent on a global market, right? Demand for that commodity is increasing faster than production. I think that's very clear. In some cases, dramatically faster than production. So if you need that one commodity to run all of your military operations, not to mention 97% of your domestic transportation sector, I think you have a national security problem. And so what you ought to be looking for is opportunities to find choice, which is very much a free market thing, so that the Defense Department or a consumer can go to a pump, and if gas costs too much, they can buy something else to power their vehicle. That's not outside the realm of technological or economic possibility. It's just something that we have to invest in because, like many other technologies, these are emerging technologies. Of course, at this point, they're nascent and they're expensive. But it's worth investing in these things now.
So thank you. That jars my memory. A couple of months ago, I don't think Mr. Burgess was there, but I was at a conference in Brazil. And one of the things we were talking, you weren't there? No, he wasn't there.
Show. I was not on that junket to Brazil.
It actually wasn't a junket. It was a very interesting conference on Brazil's energy policy. And one of the things I learned, which I hadn't known before, was Brazil has a lot of indigenous biofuels. And what they've done is with their cars, they have adapted their fuels, their automobile fuels, so that they can, and their automobiles, so that they can run on any mixture of petroleum and biofuels and ethanol. And it was fascinating to me to see because it's all dependent on market forces. So if oil is low, the price is low, they can fuel up with oil. If there's some kind of a problem if the cartel raises the prices, then they can shift almost entirely to biofuels. And I thought that's just really an interesting concept and one that supports what you're saying. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back, and thank you for that. Let me just ask in the way of a follow-up, have any of you had any experience with the the RIN program, the Renewable Identification Number program, that has come to this committee's attention. This is a program by the EPA to allow the sale. It's reminded me very much of cap and trade when I heard about it, except it's an agency-derived program that allows the sale of these renewable identification numbers. And as it turns, in order for people to blend their diesel with a certain amount of biofuel. And as it turns out that many of these places that are supposedly biofuel production areas where companies have bought those RIN credits, in fact, don't exist, or a church parking lot or a rummage sale, but they're not a biofuel producer. And it really, Dr. Green, I saw in your bibliography that and it's quite impressive, very extensive, but you had as one of the pieces that you've written, the intractable flaws of a cap and trade scheme, and it jarred my memory about the RIN program and how terribly flawed this was, and took all of the glamour of mortgage-backed securities and brought it to the renewable energies market. Would you care to share with us a little bit about what you wrote on that intractable problem with cap and trade?
Sure. Cap and trade is actually a venerable way of controlling certain kinds of pollution. If you have a localized pollutant, one sector, one jurisdiction, available control technologies that are affordable, cap and trade is a useful technique. None of that is true for the greenhouse gases, and none of that is true, generally speaking, in renewable energy credits, which are another form of cap and trade. And what you've pointed out is that because of these complexities, multiple jurisdictions, rivalrous rent-seeking groups and special interests, disparate pollutants that are non-equivalent in many ways, you just create a very fertile environment for game playing and for corruption. And we've seen this with tradable credits in Europe for carbon reduction. We'll see it wherever it's deployed, simply because you create human incentives for people to behave badly, and they'll behave badly.
So noted. Well, I want to thank the panelists. It's been a very informative morning, and certainly appreciate your time. What do I have to say here? I want to thank the witnesses for coming today, and for the testimony, and for members for their devotion to this hearing today. The committee rules provide that members have 10 days to submit additional questions for the record to the witnesses. Without objection, so ordered, and this hearing stands adjourned.